Hello, World Civ 107 class. I just really wanted to go over some things. First of all, we are almost done with this semester. Next week, we're going to do a final module, and then there's finals. So, quickly, I just want to point out that Canvas keeps some of my old assignments, even though I didn't assign them to you. And when you look on your grade book, you're going to see some assignments and wonder what they're doing there. Maybe that's already happened. Don't worry about them, okay? I don't know why that happens with Canvas, but the only time there's a problem that's going to happen is if you put an assignment into those assignments that I didn't assign you, because you're not going to get a grade for it, and it's going to kind of mess up the grade book, and I'm going to have to fix some things. And it's a very frustrating situation. Only worry about assignments that you were assigned. If I've allowed you, if we've had a discussion and you can turn in late work, and I've said that, then you're allowed to do that, and I want you to try to get on top of that, because as we get closer to the end of the semester, I'm going to be limited on time, and I'm not going to be able to take a whole lot of extra late work. So right now is the time to start really getting that figured out. If you have a lot of work that you're behind in, you cannot right now assume that I'm going to take it all and start dumping and giving me lots of late work. You have to communicate with me as your professor, and we have to see how much you are trying to get done and how much time I have to do it, because I am limited on time. That's the problem. And if we're this late in the semester, you know, that's the kind of issues that we have to deal with. I want to help you. I'm interested. Don't be intimidated about contacting me on this. But just keep in mind that I'm a mere human being, and when I have like 5 or more students try to do a massive dump on me in the middle of the end of a semester, that's not going to work necessarily. And I don't want you putting in time for something that you're not going to get credit for. But I'm not saying that I'm not open for the possibilities of actually getting those things graded for you. We are just going to have to work together. You're going to have to communicate with me. That's the bottom line. Okay? So, having said that, okay, so this week, every week has been important. I hope that what you're seeing is that, wow, there is a huge world out there. I mean, it's a small world after all, but it's not that small. And that learning about world civilizations in the context to what has made things go on in the world the way they are today is kind of mind-blowing, and you realize just how pathetic our mainstream media is, and to many extent, even all this so-called alternative media that basically just is very ideologically driven and tries to make you hate one side of America or the other, or one part of the world or another. We just have a lot of crappy, low-quality, ideologically driven media going on in the world, and you just need to be aware of that. And I'm hoping that this class shows you that if you take a look at the history of different parts of the world, things start to make more sense. And even though you may still be upset about something, it's like you realize that there's a context to something. Every time you see the context to something, it just makes things make more sense, right? And the world, just instead of being this scary random place where, you know, as if bombs were blowing up in the world and explosions and wars all were just coming out of Dimension X, you realize that there is, you know, something there that builds up to that, and the world, it does make more sense in many ways, even if it's not always still ideal in what you're seeing. Now, look, when I went to UC Santa Cruz, I was trying to do a lot of work on Assyrian identity. Many of my students here are Assyrian, and I'm talking about as opposed to Syrian identity. Assyrians mainly being a Christian minority group within the broader Middle East, mainly coming from parts of Iran or Iraq, and often speaking an Aramaic or Syriac dialect. But I also really learned a lot about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I was interested in this because, you know, when you grow up in a Christian environment and you study strictly the Bible, and you only learn about the Jewish people and Israel through the Bible, frankly, you get an extremely distorted version of history if you're trying to make sense of what's going on currently. So the Bible does help, in doing that. And if you take my 106 class, you see we cover ancient Israel and we talk about that. But one point that I've always tried to make to everyone is that you have to be careful to try to link ancient Israel and to what's going on now. Israel that exists now has existed since 1948 only. And prior to that, there was no Israel since the first century CE. And actually, even then, it was, the bottom line is Jewish dominance politically in the region hasn't happened really since the fall of we will learn about 70 CE with Rome coming in, and then the last Bar Kokhba revolts that really kind of just end Jewish sovereignty, and where Rome really cracks down on Jewish independence uprisings in that region. And so there's a big gap. There's a lot of space in between that time and that time. And so when you're seeing the Israel-Palestine conflict, it's not like the Palestinians and the Jews have been fighting since the time of Abraham. That is a complete manipulation of understanding. And if that's one thing that you can walk away from this, realizing that there's not a primordial battle between Palestinians and Jews, I'll feel really good about that you've walked away and at least understand that. Now look, there's no doubt that the religion of Islam and the Jewish religion and the Christian religion play a role in that part of the world, and that these motifs and these the histories and the religious ideas that are coming from these three different religions play a role in the conflict. What I'm just pointing out is that it's not this thing that's been going on forever and ever there. Also, I want you to keep in mind, and this is going to be in the lectures, as of the early 20th century, Jews were less than % of Palestine. So for centuries upon centuries, Arabs have been the main ethnic component to dominate that region, although it wasn't an independent political entity. And so really you end up by the 20th century having a Muslim majority Arab population, a smaller Palestinian Christian population, and two groups that I don't properly cover in this. And it's just I cover so much, and I need to apologize about this because there is some importance to this, especially for another role, and I might just post some of these in announcements because it's too. I really would like to put this into 2 weeks. It's another indigenous group to Palestine are the Druze, Druze, and they play a major role in the shaping of Israel. And when there's a conflict between the Palestinian majority and the Jewish population that leads to the creating of the state, many of the Druze are going to side with the Jews and be incorporated into the Israeli state. And those are also an indigenous Palestinian population. Now, there's a lot of Druze that are also in Syria. And again, this is kind of, there's so much complex nuances and added details to this whole entire conflict that's not discussed in the media or in popular discourse or at your churches that would help clarify so many things. And I'm going to be limited on this time, so I'm hoping to at least get you started to be interested in all this in a more balanced way. Now, the other group that I don't really talk about much is the Samaritans. And as we have the story of the Good Samaritan, with if you're a grow-up Christian, you've heard this term, or know the story of the Good Samaritan. And Samaritans still exist also, but there's only around 600 or so, and I'll end up probably posting an announcement video showing you that complicated situation at this very small minority that still exists. Excuse me. There, and ultimately, I have a lot of different reading for you to do. Although you will sense probably a certain bias that I have in this, I am trying to create also some nuance, and I want you to write when on your final paper. The idea is to write about the way that this would be seen from the two different perspectives, doing like normal history papers, having names, dates of events inside of this with the works cited. Okay, and keep in mind, I'm aware for many of you this is going to be an overwhelming amount of information. You're going to, but I wanted to at least get you kind of started and realizing the fact that this is a conflict that shows up in our media all the time and is just poorly covered like so many other events. Okay, except, last thing I'll say before I go, for many people this is a conflict that they just don't care about or are highly invested in. And if you go to a dinner party, it's like if you ask somebody's opinion on abortion, I think we all know that that's going to end the party, right? You're killing the party. You bring up abortion at a party and like, what's your position on abortion? Okay, now the whole party is just like, it's a civil war at the party, right? The Israel-Palestine conflict, it tends to be that way, especially on college campuses. So what I just want you to do is, take a deep breath, look into this, and then, look at the big picture. And like I said, I'm not going to lie. I have a very strong bias of my thoughts on this conflict. But I feel as a historian and a teacher that it's good to try to give you the broadest perspective on different opinions about it. And so I hope that I succeed in that. And anyhow, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I still work tomorrow at my other job, but I will like to be around if anybody wants to talk about any of the subject matter. And I hope you're having a great weekend, and we'll be having a good week. All right, we'll be in touch.